5 years ago, our neighbor, Mr. Reynolds, came to us with grim news. His 14-year-old son, David, had disappeared. The police were notified, search parties were formed, and the entire neighborhood was engulfed in a cloud of dread. It was on every news channel. My wife and I felt sick with worry and did whatever we could to support the Reynolds family. But as the days bled into months and then years without a word, people slowly moved on. We assumed the Reynolds family had come to terms with the worst and quietly grieved in their own way. We never had the heart to ask if they ever found his body. Mr. Reynolds and his wife Sarah changed after David vanished. Sarah became withdrawn, her laughter a ghost of what it used to be. Mr. Reynolds was different too, jittery, as if he always expected someone to sneak up behind him. During the warmer months, they would occasionally invite us over for a barbecue, but the gatherings were tense, filled with long silences and eyes that darted away when met. Then, last week, something strange happened. I was taking out the trash when Mr. Reynolds approached me, eyes hollow and shifting nervously. He asked to borrow a shovel. I didn't hesitate. I fetched my best one and handed it over. He muttered a thank you and said he had some work to do in his backyard, promising to return it the next day. I watched him retreat, a shadow among shadows. From the window upstairs, I could see him digging. The hole was large, much larger than what anyone would need for garden work. He struggled, pausing to wipe his brow, eyes darting around as if he felt unseen eyes on him. Concerned, I grabbed my second shovel and made my way over. But when I called out to him, he spun around, panic blazing in his eyes. No, it's fine. I've got it. Just leave. What's wrong with you? It's just a hole, I said, unnerved by his reaction. I won't allow you to use that shovel in my yard, he snapped, pointing to the gate as though I were a trespassing animal. His voice trembled, and the sheer strangeness of it all forced me to step back and leave without another word. Once inside, I watched through the window. He dug for another half hour, casting nervous glances at the surrounding houses. Then suddenly he looked up and caught my eye. I turned away quickly, my heart racing. That night I couldn't sleep. At 1:30 a.m., the rhythmic clink of a shovel against dirt roused me. I crept to the window, but the darkness was too thick. Driven by an unnamed fear, I tiptoed outside, peering over the fence. Under the pale moonlight, I could see him still digging. He was determined now, digging faster and harder. When he finally went inside his house, I rushed to the hole. The moonlight was dim, but enough for me to see the corner of something black poking out from the dirt. A garbage bag, it seemed. My breath caught in my throat as my mind raced with horrible possibilities. Was this a mistake? Had I come across something I wasn't meant to? My eyes darted to his back door, then back to the hole. I couldn't stop myself from looking, though I should have. For what felt like hours, I stood there, paralyzed with indecision. In the end, I ran back to my house, heart pounding in my chest. I barely made it inside when I saw him again. He was back outside, but he wasn't digging anymore. He'd vanished to the other side of the house, leaving me in the dark, alone with my thoughts. The next morning, I watched as Mr. Reynolds quickly filled the hole, covering it up with fresh dirt. His SUV was now parked in the street instead of the driveway. I felt the weight of what I might have seen, but didn't want to confront it. Still, my thoughts plagued me. Could it be possible? Had he been hiding something? His son's body? I wasn't sure, but the thought of it made my stomach turn. Charles never returned my shovel, and now he avoids me at every turn. Yesterday, as I glanced across the street, I saw him standing at one of his windows, staring directly into mine. When he caught my eye, he quickly pulled the blinds down. I froze, unsure of what to do, what to think. I'm terrified. I don't know what's happening, but I can't shake the feeling that something dark and dreadful is unfolding right under my nose. I've lived in 3 houses in my life, each with my family and now on my own. The first house, where we lived for the first 15 years of my life, holds a memory that's been haunting me ever since. It's where everything started. Our second home was a short chapter, just 7 years before I moved out on my own. But it was in the first house, right before we left, that I had an experience I've never been able to forget. We never really interacted with our neighbors, not beyond the occasional nod or wave. There were 2 boys next door, Eric and Todd, and my brother and I had only spoken to them once or twice in our lives. Strange, I know, considering how long we'd lived there. One day, as we were playing basketball in the driveway, Todd came outside and walked over to us, something we hadn't expected. I don't remember exactly what we talked about, but I do remember the first thing Todd asked. "Is it true you guys are moving?" I was the older brother, so I did most of the talking. Todd was probably around my age, but I never actually asked. By the end of the conversation, he invited me and my younger brother to come shoot BB guns with him and Eric by the river down the road. I agreed, thinking it'd be a fun way to spend the day. At the last minute, my little brother asked if he could come too, and Todd agreed without hesitation. We didn't tell our parents, of course. They had no idea what we were about to get into. Later that day, right before dusk, we saw Todd and Eric standing on our doorstep. They were wearing camo gear, looking much more serious than I expected. It was odd, to say the least. We followed them down the street, carrying a duffel bag between them. When we got to the woods, things only got stranger. Todd dropped the bag on the ground and unzipped it. At the same time, Eric snapped a branch off a tree and hurled it into the river. The whole situation was starting to feel off, like we didn't belong there, but nothing could have prepared us for what came next. Todd pulled out a couple of guns, handing one to me and one to my brother. "They're real," he said flatly. That's when my stomach dropped. Eric, without warning, pulled a loaded gun from the bag and began firing at trees across the river. The realization hit me hard. These weren't BB guns. These were real firearms. I quickly grabbed the gun from my brother's hands, put it back in the bag, and told them we weren't comfortable with this and needed to leave. Eric stopped firing, and both boys stared at us with a mixture of anger and disbelief. One of them yelled a curse as we walked away. I had known for a while that these kids were trouble, but this was confirmation. I told my brother we weren't going near them again and made sure to tell our parents that night at dinner. We didn't mention the guns, though. We kept that part to ourselves. That night, I woke up to a cold breeze against my face. My window was wide open. I felt something hard press against the back of my head. Then I heard it, a whisper just behind me. "Shh," it said, and I froze. Somehow I didn't scream or jump. I just stayed still, trying to process what was happening. It was Todd's voice, soft and menacing. "If you ever tell anyone, especially my dad, about the guns or what happened today, I'll come back and kill you, and your whole family." I couldn't move. I was paralyzed with fear. He pushed the barrel of the gun into my head before disappearing back out the window. From then on, every night for months, either Todd or Eric would be at one of their windows, staring into my room or my brother's, their eyes watching, waiting. As the date for our move drew closer, their behavior grew more bizarre. One night, just a week before we left, I woke up to a rock hitting my window at around 1 a.m. I opened it, and there was Todd, aiming a pistol right up at me. I felt the panic rise in my chest, thinking I was about to die. But instead of shooting, I heard the two of them burst out laughing. One of them called me a name I won't repeat here. There were 2 other incidents that week where they harassed either me or my brother. It wasn't just childish pranks anymore. It was intimidation, fear. I knew we needed to leave, and quickly. The thought of staying any longer in that house with those boys next door was unbearable. We moved out as planned, and after all these years, neither my brother nor I have ever told anyone the full story. We never told our parents about the guns or the threats. But looking back, I realize how lucky we were to get out when we did. Those 2 boys were troubled, dangerously so, and I have no doubt in my mind that something far worse would have happened if we stayed any longer. I'm just grateful we got away before it was too late.